You really don't?
No, I see an M, and that's it.
You probably need to change your view, Miguel, because if the M is you, it's probably just your little icon.
Um, let me see.
Look at your gallery view.
Okay, how to try to find. Where is that? Ooh.
Okay, Marley, you can go ahead and get started.
Okay. Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for taking time out on a Monday, on a Friday, um, to be here and to participate. And like Sky was saying, if at any point you have questions, please feel free. If at any point there is something that's triggering, please take care of yourself. More than anything, that's the most important thing. So the idea behind this presentation is to just partake some information that we've accumulated over time in some of the presentations we've given in the community before, and kind of mash it all together and give it to you all in hopefully an informative and helpful way. Any feedback at the end is appreciated. If this wasn't helpful, or it would be helpful if there's more of this information, I'm definitely open to that. I want to make it as useful to you all as possible. Patricia is on here as a presenter, but she's unable to do it. She is a counterpart of mine, though. She is also an advocate supervisor, and she actually does. A lot of you might know Patricia. She did work at the CPIS office as one of our advocates, and now she's the supervisor of that team and the other family advocates for our family services department. So she's here in spirit. And then, of course, me, Marley, I'm the adult advocate supervisor. What's on the agenda today? We're going to go through some true or false things and talk about what domestic violence is and power and control, how it impacts children just a little bit, and then touch on Safe and Together and some safety planning. It sounds like a lot, so I'm going to try to not be super overwhelming, but we'll try to get through it as best as we can. So I did want to open the floor up with some questions just to kick us off. And I don't know if Sky, if you have access to the chat, but if a few people, or if everybody wants to, if anybody knows like what would be a couple examples of red flags when it comes to someone that's in a domestic violence situation. What are red flags to abusive relationships, or what power and control looks like, or any sort of red flags that would indicate a domestic violence situation?
Yeah, guys, go ahead and just type your answers into the chat. This is our way of kind of doing a pre and post test. So, yeah, any red flag. So we got lack of control, we've got isolation. What else, guys? Give us a couple more. Controlling, yep. Financial, whoa, you guys are good. Jealousy, verbal abuse, bruises. Withdrawing from family and friends, yep. Love bombing.
Mm-hmm.
Body language, fearfulness. Low self-esteem. Seeking approval. Not having a voice. Guys, I think gaslighting is really bad. Controlling attire, that's a good one.
It is.
Okay. So we got a bunch of great responses here. So
That's amazing.
But what's gaslighting, Marley?
So gaslighting, I don't know whoever brought that in, it's a phrase that has been used in regards to domestic violence or abusive relationships, as basically.
It's a form of manipulation.
Right, it's a form of like emotional or mental control, where you have overload someone with not the truth, and all of a sudden, I'm not really great at explaining it because I don't use it very often, but so maybe Susan, if you have a better
I think it could be often misused, and oftentimes it's misused because it's a form of psychological manipulation, and sometimes it's kind of used out of context, but it has a lot to do with also very harmful narcissistic type of behaviors. And so it is primarily used a lot of times in very abusive relationships and also in the mental health arena with relation to sociopaths.
Okay. What's love bombing? Whoever said love bombing, can you?
That's what I said. It's part of the cycle of abuse. Like, after the abuser will abuse his or her partner, they load them up with love, like, I love you so much, buy them gifts or things like that.
Thank you, Jules. I didn't know that had a term. Okay, great start, guys. Thank you.
So does anybody have any questions right off the bat? I know we just asked you a question, but do you all have any questions to start with? Anything, any burning questions? Things that you want answered in this training, maybe?
If you think of anything during the training that you want, covered, just put it in the chat box and I'll be able to relay that to Marlene.
Yes. Perfect. All right. So we'll move on to the true and false. So the dynamics of domestic violence, true or false? Alcohol and drug use is a major cause of domestic violence. What do you all think?
I think false. It's a contributing factor. So we got everybody saying true.
It is. So although drugs and alcohol are often associated with domestic violence, they don't cause it. So why don't they cause it? Because drugs and alcohol use are a form of manipulating your own state of mind and not someone else's. So it's not the social stigma that comes out of people's perception of alcohol and drug abuse in relation to domestic violence might come from the fact that substance use can escalate the situation, but it doesn't cause it. So there's a lot of people, even survivors that we talk to when it comes to safety planning, we'll talk about, they know when to stay away from their partner when they've been drinking or when they're under the influence, because that's what causes them to be violent. What we know and everything that we understand about intimate partner violence and domestic violence is that it's a learned behavior, so it doesn't actually come from the fact that they are under the influence in any way. It's a behavior that they've learned and adapted as coping, but it will and oftentimes escalates the situation, but it's not always the cause. It's never a cause of the domestic violence. All right, so question number 2, men are not victims of intimate partner violence. What do we think?
Marley, can you not see the chat?
I can't see the chat.
Okay, so you know the upper right hand bar I was telling you about?
Yes.
Where it's like the second symbol in. Click it.
So I can, because I'm sharing my screen and it's in a presentation, I don't get a whole lot of options. Hold on one second.
No, it's right there, I promise. It's in between the hand and the 2 little people on the top right.
It looks like a conversation bubble from a comic.
can only see it if I stop sharing my screen.
Okay, no worries. So everybody's pretty much in consensus that this one is false.
Right, okay. Yes, it is false. So statistically, we have 1 in 7 men will be victims of intimate partner violence. So a lot of times there's the stigma that men are not able to be victims of domestic violence or intimate partner violence, but we know that to be false. Glad everybody is, that's something that we all. Unfortunately, we have the stigma attached to it, but we, even at Women in Distress, we do serve members of the LGBTQ community and male victims of domestic violence and intimate partner violence. We have male support groups. So that's something that we're trying to reduce the barrier to be able to support all survivors of domestic violence. Domestic violence is due to poverty or lack of formal education.
False. I'm getting a lot of falses.
Correct. There is no evidence that supports the idea that uneducated or poor people are more likely to abuse partners than their more educated or affluent counterparts. Domestic violence is common through every level. It's actually, in my personal experience, it's almost scarier when people are coming from affluent backgrounds, because there's usually an extra level of power and control and manipulation that comes in with that financial piece. Like someone had said in the beginning, with that financial abuse, that definitely comes into play, and it does not discriminate. Abuse, power, and control does not discriminate. Most people will end a relationship if it becomes abusive. True or false?
Hold on. We're getting falses here. False.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Consensus is false.
Correct. So, what we know to be true is that on average, women will leave an abusive relationship up to 7 times or around 7 times before they leave for good. This is usually something that other service providers we know it to be true, but we have a hard time putting it into practice and safety planning, because we want to support people. We want to support them staying or leaving or whatever it is, but we want to support them being safe. But oftentimes we forget this in practice, and so we push to have people leave before they're ready to leave. So this is if I could asterisk it, it would be this, to remember this as a service provider when you're working with survivors, to be patient as they go through their own process of leaving or moving into a safe space with their partner. Most men who abuse their partner grew up in violent homes.
Marley, we have a really good question right now. Is it true that leaving is the most dangerous time for the woman in a DV situation?
Absolutely. We definitely know that to be true, because if someone is the survivor and they're taking it upon themselves to take control of their life and their own safety, that generally triggers their abusive partner to kind of ratchet up the tactic, which usually puts the survivor at more risk, because they're starting to lose control over the situation.
Great question, guys.
Yes. True, men and boys who have witnessed violence with their partners are 3 times more likely to abuse their own partners and children. So it's not a definite, it's not a prescription that this is for sure going to happen, but it is a likelihood when someone grows up in an abusive home, that the chances are greater. Again, most, so it's not all. So the abuser has anger management issues.
We got one true, 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 one false, two falses. So it seems split.
Nice. I like this one. So this one would be another asterisk for me. Another important, above all the other ones, another important one to remember because it is false. So what we know about domestic violence is it's intentional conduct and that abusive partners are not out of control. In fact, they're very much in control. So the violence that they bring into the home is concentrated specifically on the person that they are manipulating and the person that they are taking advantage of. Right? So it's carefully targeted to the certain people that they know are most vulnerable to them. They don't generally, anger management would look like being angry all the time or road rage, yelling at your boss or yelling at your coworkers or yelling at your children's school teacher. That would be an anger management issue. But someone who is abusive and as we refer to as intimate partner violence, they're very specific on taking advantage of the partner. So the person, unfortunately, the person that's closest to them and is supposed to share the most intimate relationship with them is the one person that they abuse.
We have someone that said they've seen it both ways.
So you can have both. You can have anger issues, and you can also be an abusive. You can have power and control issues. It's possible to have both, but the intimate partner violence framework and we'll go into it too. It's all based on power and control. It doesn't have anything to do with anger. It can present both though in the same person. And that's why assessing for power and control becomes really important when it comes to safety planning and offering services for that person. Victims of abuse often feel embarrassed, ashamed, and feel as though the abuse is their fault.
Okay, we got a bunch of truths here.
Sure. Yep.
Overwhelmingly,
absolutely. Which becomes another barrier for people before they try to seek help, right? Which is why when I worked with ChildNet cases, it was one of the things that came up maybe 6 or 7 months into a case plan. And it was not the original maltreatment. So it might have come in for, so it might have come in as a different maltreatment, but 6 months later, it comes up that there was an incident of assault where there was a domestic violence situation in the home. And usually that's where that's usually when as working in ChildNet, that's usually when I would get roped in to the case instead of at the beginning without that, assessment of understanding power and control. It would go unseen and untreated, if you will, that whole time because they were, focused on the first maltreatment.
Guys, for those of you that don't know, a maltreatment code is what a case is given when it is called into the abuse hotline. So, Miguel, can you give an example of a maltreatment code that you would see on a case that's called in?
A maltreatment code? I don't know what that is. I mean,
okay. So a maltreatment code is what it's coded as. So we have things like domestic violence and intimate partner violence usually comes in as family violence threatens child. And then we also have a maltreatment code of substance misuse, environmental hazards, inadequate supervision. So each the abuse hotline codes it with a maltreatment code.
Oh. Okay, what was the question again?
You're fine. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
Thank you, though. So we know statistically, 1 in 4 women experience intimate partner violence in the United States. This is a statistic from the CDC from 2016. There's other reports. The most recent reports we have are probably from 2017. But this includes levels of sexual violence, physical violence, and stalking by their intimate partner. So it's not just physical. And what we do know is that women aged 18 to 24 are at the highest risk. Does anybody know why? Would anybody be able to guess why? It's usually because it's typically the age where intimate relationships generally
Yes, that's what we got. Young and impressionable, their brain is not fully developed, lack of education.
Right, or lack of life experience to understand red flags, right? Exactly. So we have 1 in 4 same-sex partners experience intimate partner violence. Same-sex couples face barriers to equal treatment or assistance with domestic abuse. We also have the issue of when authorities come into the figure or into the picture, not really understanding the dynamic between the couple or the relationship that they have, and putting it, on the police report as, not putting it on the police report as intimate partner violence, but rather just domestic dispute between roommates, instead of really understanding or really being able to paint an accurate picture of the dynamic of what's happening with that family. So the lethality of it is also on a scale, but to understand the significance of intimate partner violence as it relates to kind of a public health picture is also understanding, the fatality that happens with intimate partner violence. So 4 people every day, on average 3 women and 1 man are killed by their intimate partner every day. And that statistic is from 2013, so it's a little outdated. But in any of the research that you show, it's not much different. So it's fairly consistent.
We have a comment, they don't understand trauma and how it relates to the brain development, thus causing questionable decisions and or how to understand / process red flags.
Exactly.
Well said.
Yes, well said. So one of the issues, again, when it comes to maybe law enforcement and their perspective on domestic violence is there's a Florida statute, and the Florida statute is very specific to anything that can be kind of proven with evidence that is tangible, right? Aggravated assault and battery, sexual assault and battery, stalking, kidnapping, false imprisonment, and anything resulting in a physical injury or death of one family member or household member to another. So this, unfortunately, the Florida statute being able to prosecute domestic violence becomes difficult when it is financial, when it is emotional, when it is psychological. That becomes very difficult to try to prove, and that's something as domestic violence advocates, we try to make a concerted effort to safety plan specifically for those things, since there really isn't a protection in the law for those things. So as an agency, what we understand to be domestic violence and also intimate partner violence is that it's a pattern of assaultive and coercive behaviors. And the emphasis would be on pattern. It's a pattern of behavior. The intent of the behavior is for the batterer to establish power and control over the survivors, and their behaviors are more than just an isolated incident. So unlike the Florida statute, where it just has to be that one incident of physical violence, what we know to be true is domestic violence is not just the one incident. it's not the one time that a fight escalated into a physical altercation, that there had been an established pattern of behavior that led up to that point much before whatever that fight had been about. And this also helps. So when we provide these trainings, when we go out into the community and we talk to service providers, most of my experience in training has been in training child advocates and the investigators. It's very important to understand kind of the perspective that we're coming at it, which is understanding first and foremost that violence isn't caused by the victims, and that no matter what, their behaviors won't stop the abuse. As a survivor, no matter what they do, it's not going to stop the abuse forever, right? That has to be, the onus of that has to be on the person bringing the violence into the home. So we're using language and we're having the conversation to shift the focus from the survivor to the abuser, right? By being better able to understand what that pattern looks like, being better able to understand what the red flags are from an outside perspective, and even, you know, what the high lethality indicators would be. Most people wouldn't know or wouldn't assume that stalking is considered a high lethality indicator. And it's something that, again, that group of 18 to 24-year-old people experience almost overwhelmingly the majority of it. So they are at high risk, even if stalking is one of the things that's happening, one of the things that they're experiencing. What time is it? I have an activity, but it might take too long, so I'm gonna bypass the activity. But essentially, it's an activity that we like to do. It works way better in person, but it's possible to do virtually too. It basically walks you through the story of someone in their decision-making process. I don't know if anyone has ever done an in her shoes or in their shoes activity before, but
why don't you give it a shot, Marley?
Okay, we can.
I mean, because they could just, you know, think about it, you know?
Yeah, so it's a series of decisions. We're in the shoes of a young teenager, and her name is Kara. And what I'm going to do is I'll read the kind of the setup card, and then we can move forward into the decisions. And we'll make a couple of decisions, and we'll see where that takes us down the road. Is that okay with everybody? Is that good?
Let's do it.
Do it. All right. So we're stepping into the shoes of Kara. And it's going to be written in first person. So I'm Kara. We're all Kara. Last week, I got the best news. I got into college. My first choice. I have 3 scholarships, and they cover almost everything. I can't wait to start this new adventure. I graduate Northern High in 4 months. I turn 18 in 5 months. Quit my job at the ice cream shop in 6 months, and start freshman orientation in 7 months and 6 days. Not that I'm counting. Brian was happy for me when he heard, but he said, "Does that mean you're going to move away?" And I was thinking, hello, it's like 1,000 miles from here. But I just said, no, I'm not thinking about that today. I know he's not the one, but it's just been so hard to break it off with him. So, the first situation. You told Brian that you needed to have a serious talk with him. He brought you a dozen long-stemmed roses and a box of chocolates. He's not going to make this easy, is he? I've been doing a lot of thinking, you begin, and I think you're a fantastic person, but no buts, Care Bear. Here, have a chocolate. And he pops one in your mouth before you can object. We've been down this road before, and I've thought through everything. Yes, you've tried to break up with him 6 times in the year that you've been dating, but this time it has to be different because you're going to college. Kara, honey, I bet I can get a job transfer and we can just rent an apartment near the university. I'll cook dinner every night and bring you snacks to the library. But promise me that you'll think about it. Just think about it. You sigh, and before you can say anything else, he's got his arms around you and he's saying, thank you, gracias, you smell so good, let's go have fun. So you have the option to keep talking with Brian or go home to your parents or to your mom. If you were 17-year-old Kara, what would you pick?
Guys,
Yeah,
type
a couple of
do into the chat box.
yeah. We can
Okay.
either stay with Brian or go with mom.
Okay. We've got stay. We've got he loves me. We've got stay. Keep talking. I put keep talking as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So 17-year-old Kara Bear, we're staying.
Yep.
All right. So you pull away and you say, Brian, this isn't easy, but I need to be on my own right now. I just don't want to be dating anyone. But I'll support you, make things better for you. Just don't make any decisions we both might regret later. Brian, isn't there something that you could do that would make you happy? Remember we talked about you making that cooking class at the community college? I bet that would be great. Yeah, or maybe we could take classes together. I don't think so. So now we go with mom or we go to soccer practice.
Wait, Marley, I'm sorry. What was the? I got a funny. Someone wrote ghosting. What is it? What are the options? I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. It's like I said, it's a little more difficult when it's virtual. So basically, she tried to try to push the subject, and he's saying we could do it together. We could do it together. So the options are to go talk to your mom or your family, or go to soccer practice. So be with friends or be with family.
So we have overwhelmingly practice.
All right. So you're doing fine during your soccer drills, and practice helps take your mind off of things with Brian, but in the game your timing is off and you keep missing the ball. Afterwards, in the locker room, your friend Whitney asks you what's going on. And you say, I tried to break up with Brian. And she says, oh, I'm sorry, Kara, he seems like a nice guy. He's totally nice, but I'm going to be starting college in a few months, and you want to be free, I get it. But I'm worried about him, Kara says. I don't want to sound conceited or anything, but I know he thinks I'm the only good thing in his life right now. Whitney says, that's got to be really hard for you. So you email him later on in the evening. So, hi, Brian. So we've had some really great times together, and I think that you're a really great guy, but I need to be on my own right now. You're so special, and I know you'll find your path in life. I think you're a great cook. Maybe you could look at that cooking class. I know you have a bright future ahead of you, and the right girl is out there for you. Just wait and see. I'm going to be so boring, studying all the time, but I need to do this for me. Please understand. There's always going to be a place for you in my heart. Please don't call me for a while. I need some space. I know this is hard, but it's for the best. So you send off your email. Do you want to head straight to work, or do you want to hang out with your family and help your little sister with homework?
Okay. Overwhelmingly, go to work.
Go to work.
Marley, wait 1 second. I want to bring something up. I'm sorry. Tobin Brown says, I wasn't being funny. This guy's willing to hear. Ghost him. What would that?
He's unwilling to hear her. So I think no matter what she says to him, he's just going to keep pushing forward.
Right. So already you're starting to see some of like the red flags, maybe, that if you were one of Kara's close friends, that you might start to get a little concerned for her, right? Or maybe not. Because again, as some of you had said before, that age group, right, between, especially if this is your first relationship, you might not really grasp kind of the weight of someone not giving up and being persistent to that level, right?
You're on mute, Tobin. You're still on mute.
I know that. I have conversations that you guys probably shouldn't hear. I
Oh.
just said sometimes you have to cut and run.
Mm-hmm. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying, what would Care Bear do?
I thought it was what
Thinks he
we wanted
loves
her
it.
to do.
It
Are we
says,
supposed to guess what she's going to do or what we want her to do?
no, what she would do. So some people in the chat, this is dead right, the MD one. We're going back to our 17-year-old self. So we're trying to imagine what a 17-year-old female in her first relationship would do. We would like her to ghost him. I mean, yes, cut and run, ghost him, go to college, girl, get your education. Right. You know, so definitely I would like her to do that. And then the Marley, the overwhelming response is go to work, not talk to the parents.
Okay. All right. So go to work. So even though you're sick of the taste of ice cream, the smell of waffle cones still makes you happy. You put on your apron and sign in. And you're early, says your coworker. Only a few minutes. I'll sweep up for you. That's so sweet. How's that cute boyfriend of yours? And you say, and Kara says, we're going our separate ways. Oh, that's too bad. It must be rough. Actually, it's not. I feel lighter than I have in a long time. It's for the best. Well, then can you give me his number? Just kidding, sort of. It's strange how everyone, except your mom, thinks Brian is such a catch. In your heart, you know that you don't want to be with him anymore. Do you want to go out with your friends or go home and spend the evening with your family after work?
We're getting responses. Okay, go out with your friends.
Go out with friends. All right. So you and Whitney meet up with a bunch of friends at the mall. You're hanging out in the food court for a while, trying to decide which movie to see when you feel a tap on your shoulder. The hair on the back of your neck stands up. It's Brian. Your friends all say hello to him, and he sits down next to you. Whitney, who's the only person you told about the breakup, gives you a look like, what's up? Do you want to ask Brian to leave and continue hanging out with your friends, or just leave and go home?
Oh, wow, that's a hard one. So we've got ask him to leave, which is the same as kick rocks. I like this one. I would rely on my friends. Wait, what is this? I can't see it. Darn it. Hold on. Give me 2 seconds. I would rely on my friends to be the in-between and do my dirty work for me. I might do that. Yeah. I think she would want to stay, but would probably just leave and go home, which is what he probably wants. I also said I would leave.
So we're leaving?
No, most of them
Say friends?
Hold on. Give me 2 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, most of them say continue hanging out, tell them to leave.
All right.
And some people do say go ahead and leave, but more people are saying continue hanging out.
All right. So you're feeling a little shaken up. You asked Brian to give you some space, and he's totally ignored that. Maybe you should have broken up with him in person, but every time you tried that, he somehow talked you out of it. Brian, not now, you tell him quietly. He holds you by the wrist and leans into your ear and says, I just want to talk to you, Kara, just 5 minutes. You owe it to me. Do you go talk to Brian separately, or you say no and you go home? 17-year-old Kara.
Go talk. Go
All right.
talk. Yeah, it looks like go talk.
All right, so you take a big breath and you try to relax. Did you get my email? You ask him. He says, yes, but I think we just need to talk about it. I know we can work it out. Brian, I sent you the email because you didn't let me do this in person. Please understand. He looks at you with glassy eyes and his face is turning red. He's crying. Tears are rolling down his cheeks. You've never seen him like this before. Brian, it's okay. It's okay. You pat his shoulder awkwardly. It's not. Without you, I'm nothing. My life is shit. I have thoughts. Thoughts about ending it all. Brian, that's crazy. You're an amazing person. Really. Please believe me. Brian quickly looks up and stares you straight in the eye and says, if I'm so amazing, then why are you dumping my ass? So you can either keep talking with Brian or end the conversation and leave.
Okay. One keep talking, one end the conversation, end conversation. Oh, we got one. Hold on. End it. Unfortunately, I've had this experience and I left. Thank you for sharing, by the way. Don't say another word, leave. So it's pretty split.
Sounds like a lot of people, like from what you said leave.
Yeah, tell Brian to go fry. I don't get that one. Sonia said, don't say another word, leave. Left and came back. Please end this conversation. Keep talking. Unfortunately, yeah, we've got a mixed bunch here.
So, but I think I'm hearing a lot of leaving. So we'll go with leave the conversation and go home. So you're feeling guilty, like maybe you could have handled this whole thing a little better. Maybe you should have broken up with him a long time ago, before he got so attached. You take a bath and you say a little prayer for him, then one for yourself, and it's time to get some rest. So if you want to go to sleep and then head to school, we'll pick the school card, and if you want to go jogging with Whitney the next morning, pick the front card. So do we want to sleep and go to school, or wake up early and go running with Whitney? We're all soccer stars here, so we can actually do that.
We got go running, go to school, It's like kicking around. Go running. Yeah.
Okay. So we go running. You like jogging with Whitney. Normally you have good conversations. Not today though. You don't feel like talking. Everything okay? Whitney asks. Yeah, I guess. What's up? I don't know. This breakup, it's just really exhausting. He's not letting you go, is he? You've been having these crazy thoughts, like he's following you, but it seems too dumb to tell Whitney that. No, not yet. Just then you jump when you see a car that looks just like Brian's pull into a parking lot across the street. Wow, you really need to get a grip. Goes to the next card. So you plan on waiting to talk to your mom until after dinner. But when she asks, how are you doing? You immediately start sobbing. Your mom tells your sister to go finish making dinner while the two of you go to your mom's office to talk. He's been talking about how depressed he is and that sometimes he thinks about hurting himself, and I'm getting all crazy because I think he's following me, and then I think I see his car, and well, he might be following you, honey. And you burst into tears again. I don't know what to do. Well, he needs help, that's for sure. But honey, you're not the one who can help him. He needs professional help. I know, Mom, but I think it would be wise to stay away from him until he's doing better. I'm trying. I know, and you're doing a great job. I'm so sorry you have to go through this. I wish I knew what else to tell you, but soon enough, you'll be off at college. You wake up the next morning feeling much better, and it's Saturday. No plans until the evening when you're scheduled to work. So do you want to work on some homework or go hang out with your friends?
Friends, hang out with friends, hang out. 1, 2, 3. Hang out. Okay, seems like hangout wins.
So you call Whitney, and she says, I was just going to call you. There's free facials and makeovers at the beauty school today. We're going at 11, no objections. I don't know. Come on, it'll be fun, something different. Okay. It's only a mile or so away from your house, and it's a beautiful morning, so you walk over and you find yourself scanning the streets for Brian's car. Whitney goes first, and you sit and read magazines, then it's your turn, and you lean back in the chair for your facial. It's really relaxing. When you're done, you can't find Whitney. You look into the parking lot and feel like the wind has been knocked out of you. Whitney's talking to Brian, and they're both crying. You head outside. What the? I just wanted to say goodbye, Brian says. I can't take it anymore. I just wanted you to hear it from me. Whitney bites her lip to keep from crying and says in a fake calm voice that Brian's just having a rough day today. He brought his dad's gun with him, but that's just because he was feeling so upset from before. Right, Brian? Brian looks down at the ground. So Brian and I were talking about how he's going to leave me with the gun and I'll hold it for him. So, I don't know, it's my dad's. You know, I'd be happy to bring it to him. I don't know. So you call the police, or you keep talking with Whitney and Brian?
Keep talking, keep talking, keep talking. Oh, one person said police. John Glover said police. Keep talking. Okay, overwhelmingly keep talking. Oh,
Kara.
Yeah. Keep talking or just leave again. Yeah, but keep talking.
Kara, I'm just here to say goodbye, Brian repeats. Don't say that. Promise me you won't do anything. You don't know what it's like. He towards Brian's car where the gun is hanging out of the glove compartment. I'm just going to hold this for you, Brian, okay? No, I don't know. I don't think that's a good idea. He climbs into the driver's seat. I just wanted to say goodbye, he repeats, and drives away. You're shaking. Whitney drives you home, and you take a long nap before you head to work. You never nap because you're so shaken up, and you just want to forget about everything for a while. So the smell of waffle cones continues to comfort you. You're happy for the bright lights and cheerful colors. You go to the back room and get your apron on. You glance out the back window at the parking lot. Shit, he's here. You don't want to make a scene at work, but you know that you have to tell your coworker Allison and manager Mary. Mary looks out the window and says that she's calling 911. Do you leave and go home or stay and wait for the police?
Stay. 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 Wait for the popo. Stay. Stay. It looks like it's stay.
Okay. So the police arrive and start talking to Brian. He won't get out of his car. Mary gives you an update every few minutes, then the officer asks to talk to you. Your boyfriend's pretty upset, the officer tells you. We broke up. You're sobbing now. Do you think that there's any chance that you'll get back together? What? He keeps asking. He really wants to talk to you. Do you want to talk to him now? No, absolutely not. I think that it might help, the officer says. We'll stay here, you know. You'll be safe. No, you're trying really hard not to freak out now. I don't want to talk to him. Look, we can't stay here all night, one of the police officers tells you. But I'm scared of him, and I don't want to talk to him, you blurt out. Look, honey, he's just sad about the breakup. He's not going to do anything about it. I've seen this a million times. The officer leaves the room to talk with Brian. The officer returns a few minutes later. I spoke to Brian. He's upset about you breaking up with him, but he said that he isn't going to hurt himself. And he told me that if you'll just talk to him, he'll go away and not bother you again. I don't want to talk to him, you stutter. Are you sure? Because I kind of hinted that you talked to him, and that calms him down real good. Just for a few minutes. Just think about it. And then the officers leave the room. An hour passes, and then 2. Now another officer asks you to talk with Brian. They tell you that they need you to help. An officer walks you outside. Brian gets out of the car as soon as he sees you. The police officer walks away and turns her back to you. I can't live without you, Kara. You're making me do things that I don't want to have to do. What? Pretty soon it's going to be too late for me, for us. You feel your knees go weak and you start crying hysterically. Mary and Allison rush out and guide you back into the store. They call your mom and she drives over right away. Everyone's trying to reassure you. Meanwhile, the police tell your mom that Brian has left. How long will he be locked up for, she asks. We didn't make an arrest. He was feeling better and said that he wouldn't come around anymore. What? Are you kidding me? Your mom shouts. Look, Miss Young, if you're concerned, you can always get a protection order, but the officer doesn't tell your mom how to do that. So Mary looks up the information online and gives it to your mom. Your mom's hands are shaking and there has to be something else that we can do, someone we can call, like a number or something. I mean, this isn't right, but no one knows who to call. So you decide to go to court and get a protection order the next morning.
Marley, I want to jump in and
Yep.
say that we've got a lot of comments about how the police are the abusers, they're not handling it correctly. Just a lot of the cops are very extremely inappropriate.
Yeah. So I can keep going. There's still like a little bit left of the story, but I think it's a good spot to kind of stop and just check in with all the red flags, right? So what are some of the things that Kara has gone through? Some of the things that now we're moving back into the mind of a service provider and an adult who's been through some things and things that we know now that we didn't know then. What would we tell Kara at this point? What would be some of the red flags that we would tell her to stay away from?
He is blaming her for his feelings, all the drama. And his actions. He's too persistent, allowing the officers to minimize her fears. He's constantly showing up. You're making me do things, in quotes, showing up uninvited when she's with her friends. Stalker. Because he didn't listen the first time, should have been a red flag.
Right. So there's a lot of these things that
the gun.
Yeah, for sure. And that's the escalation, right? And someone was saying before that the first time.
It's a good one, guys. He's also threatened goodbyes, which makes her feel guilty.
Yeah, using guilt, that emotional manipulation piece, for sure.
I would say the suicide threat.
Yeah. And the hard part is that none of the things that he's done, which I think someone brought up in the comments, none of the things that he's done falls under the Florida statute for domestic violence. He didn't threaten anybody. He brought the gun, but he didn't use it. He wasn't even holding it. You know, and unfortunately, the officers that responded to that incident sound woefully underprepared for anything, right? Any sort of relationship, you know, I've seen this a million times, they said, but not every case is the same. Not every person is the same. Not everyone's going to take it to the same level. And there's parts of this story that overlap with not just the individual, right? Like the red flags that are happening and the warning signs that are alarm bells that are going off for all of us for the interpersonal piece, but the systems piece, with the lack of support from the police, they left without telling the mom how to even get a restraining order. They just said, go get one. Just assuming that everyone knows how to get one. They had to look it up online, you know.
Stop it.
There's a lot of the issues in this story particularly that are systemic. him threatening his own life and the police officer is not taking that into account, like you were saying, Sky, the threats of suicide, just kind of brushing that off, saying, oh, he's not going to do anything. Training, preparedness, anyone who's been to like an adult mental health first aid class or even a youth mental health first aid class, you don't not take those things seriously, you know. Even if you don't know how to respond to it, you don't just brush it off. So I'm gonna move on from that activity just to make sure that we have enough time to go through everything else, but I do understand that it might have brought up a lot of things for people. So if you want to take just a minute to kind of breathe and take a moment for yourself, I totally understand. I'll just move on to some statistics. It's a little less, you don't have to think about it so much. So the Center for Disease Control and Prevention does highlight intimate partner violence as a public health issue. The cost of it, as far as
your screen didn't change, your slide didn't change.
No?
No, there's no statistics up.
Oh, that's weird.
There we go.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So $8.3 billion is the cost of it, from any sort of victim services support or any legal costs that go into it, to medical response, and that's the total cost, which is another reason why it's considered a public health issue. 80 million days of paid work are lost to victims of domestic violence. So not only does it impact our public health and other systems, but also our economy. It impacts our economy. And also it's a huge factor when it comes to reasons and epidemiology when it comes to homelessness.
Yeah.
So when we think about what it takes to gain power and control over someone, it's an interesting question, because we don't always think about it from the perspective of the abusive partner. We always think about what you could do to get out, right? So this is our intimate partner violence. This is the power and control wheel, which many of you, I'm sure, have seen before, and if not, this is kind of one of our logos in the realm of domestic violence and IPV. This is kind of the first thing that we share with people when we do any of our DV 101 classes or any of the psychoeducational groups that we do with people, is it breaks down all the different tactics, and it helps to kind of visualize the idea that all of these tactics result in some sort of violence, whether it's physical, emotional, sexual. That's the outside ring. That's what we can see. But on the inside, kind of the spokes of the wheel are all the different tactics, or all the different categories and ways in which people can gain power and control over someone, or how they choose to do that.
Now, Martha, you mentioned sexual control. Can you, like, my understanding of that, and if you could elaborate, is even just as little as just they keep bugging you, like, okay, you know, you're come on, let's have sex. You obviously don't love me, and I'm not talking like the first time. I'm talking about, like, you know, at night or something. They'll just keep like begging for it, and they won't stop. And so sometimes, as females or males, you know, we're just like, fine, okay, let's just get it over with.
Right. And that kind of yeah, so that kind of goes into, well, there's a line, right? It crosses when it becomes, is it truly something that you say, like, that you don't want to do? And is it that emotional manipulation, right? So how much of it is manipulation of your feelings, and how much of it is, there's a difference in just saying, like, yeah, sure, whatever, I'm just, stop asking, it'll be fine. and it's something that you end up, you know, that's something that you do with your partner and you both get something out of it, or it's not something that you get anything out of except you feel worse and you feel taken advantage of and you feel guilty and you feel, you know, you're in that power and control dynamic has switched. You know, it's not level, it's not, you're not on an equal playing field with your partner anymore. You are now taken advantage of. Right. And again, it's not just the one incident, it's that pattern that happens over and over and over again. It's how the abuser gets their needs met is by taking control of the situation.
Carol just commented, even rape, you feel like it's okay. So I think Carol meant like even, Carol, can you expand on that for me? Carol Brand?
I don't think her microphone was working. She had posted that before, so it's probably going to take her to chat it in the chat.
Yeah. So that's definitely a component of that power and control, and it overlaps with that emotional abuse piece.
She just posted in there when in a relationship, and I think, when, sometimes as a survivor of domestic violence and you're in a relationship, in an intimate relationship, sometimes the forced act of the sexual interaction is a form of rape, even though you're in a relationship, because it is forced. And I think maybe that's what she's talking about. I know from my own personal experience, that's kind of what it was like, and it is not, it's kind of demeaning and kind of humiliating, and you feel like you're forced, because otherwise you're going to be abused in another form of a way.
Right. Exactly. So understanding that these tactics, all the different ways, every situation is going to have, it's going to look different for everyone, what this looks like, right? So what we were talking about is that sexual coercion, right? That sexual, the assault piece of it, but that sexual coercion that's pushing and pushing, and threatening maybe some other form of violence, right? But it ends up feeling like you have been manipulated. It's not something that you wanted to happen at all, right? So all of these tactics might fall under the same category, but for each individual, it's going to look very different. But one of the reasons why we always bring it back to this power and control wheel is to visualize that it all is centered around power and control. It's not centered around anger. It's not centered around substance use or alcohol use. It's not centered around any of that. It's all centered around that power and control. It's that person who feels that in order to get their needs met, they need to have power and control over somebody else. They need to use tactics of intimidation. They need to minimize that person's feelings or deny that they even, what do you mean that didn't happen? I didn't do that. That's your fault that you feel that way. I don't, any of that, any of the blame for things that have happened, threats of violence, threats of harm, peer pressure, emotional abuse, any of those tactics, we have, as from the outside looking in, if we have a better understanding of what it means for that person to exist in that dynamic, we can help them safety plan in ways that actually make them feel safe and get them potentially out of that situation. Does anybody else have any questions? I don't know if I...
Yeah, I actually typed in the chat box, working with, when I was running the FIT team, I had worked with, I put many men, but I'd say at least 5 that were survivors of domestic violence. And I even call them survivors, even if they're actively in the relationship, because every day they're surviving. And it just seems so much harder for the men to come out of the shadows in a way, because of what society tells men they should be.
Exactly. And that's an additional barrier.
So I feel like of course, it's underreported for women as well, but I think it's extremely underreported for men.
Right. And a lot of the statistics will show that survivors, the majority, 85% are women and 15% are men. But that is also assuming that everyone that it happens to is reporting it, but it's severely underreported by women and just astronomically underreported for men, because exactly that, because of the stigma attached to it, because of that social pressure of what it's supposed to be like, what it's supposed to look like, what you are and what you aren't allowed to do according to norms that everyone feels that pressure of. It's also important here to know and to note that it's a learned behavior. So again, this is how someone who is abusive has learned to get their needs met, right? They see it as that win-lose relationship. If I'm not winning, I'm losing. And that there's only one way to get what they need, and it's through control. So what question aren't we asking? After all of this, and which is amazing, and I appreciate it, but what question aren't we asking?
Okay, Sonia's got a good comment. Wait, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know if I was on mute still. In my family, the women are the dominant person in the relationship. Have seen my mother, grandma, and aunts be the aggressor in the relationship. Yeah, so like she's saying, that the women beat too.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you for sharing that, Sonia.
Yes, and thank you to anyone who's sharing. It's definitely, it's not easy to, and it's hard. It's appreciated in terms of the learning process, but also in your willingness to share. I appreciate it.
We also had another question earlier that I did not get to, so I apologize. It says, I would like to know the best way to help someone because I know that some actions can make it worse for the person. It's a tricky situation and would love to be educated on the proper way to support it. Great comment and question, by the way.
Amazing. And it's something that we're going to get into a little bit more towards the end. And we're moving into that right now a little bit. But I mean, just you wanting to be there and wanting to do the right thing by that person says more, because most of the time people don't take that into consideration, that what they're doing might be harmful.
And then Carol Brand had a really good comment. Some women that survive abuse can become the abuser.
Mm-hmm. Right. Again,
yeah.
Because it all goes back to that learned behavior. It's how they have learned to get their needs met. And that takes, for that person, it's not something you're born being or born doing. We learn it through childhood. We learn it through our relationship. We learn it through family. We learn it through our relationships. It's in a way, it's a coping skill that we have, and it's just how we interact with our intimate partners. So what question aren't we asking? We're not asking, why haven't they left yet? Right, and it's, which every time I've given a training or I've had a conversation, it's not a very helpful question, right? Like, why aren't they leaving? That's not the question that we should really be asking. It's, where is the abuse? Like, how do we stop the abuse? Not, why aren't they leaving? One of the philosophies that we base all of our work on is the empowerment model. just to give a little bit of background about the approach that we take with all of our survivors. It's part of our training as domestic violence advocates that we have to go through in order to work with survivors. So we actually get a privileged status through the state, but we have to go through this training. And the training philosophy is the empowerment model. So even if you take one or two of these with you, this will help you in navigating some of that space with survivors. So validating their experience and working with them instead of for them to connect them to community resources, and focusing on their strengths. It's really hard when for people who are in abusive relationships to even be able to identify their own strengths. So if it's something that you know you can call out and you can call attention to and help build off of those strengths, that's an incredible strategy to help someone find a way, right? Because they do have strengths. Their abusive partner is actively trying to convince them that they don't have any and that they're dependent on them for things, or that they wouldn't be the same without them, or that they need them. But if you're the person in their life that says, no, look at all these things you've accomplished, this is what you're good at, you might be the first person in a long time that's told them that they're good at or strong at anything in particular. So focusing on their strengths and their autonomy to be able to make decisions, pulling resources together, helping connect them to those resources, helping to lower or decrease the barriers that person might face, especially people in marginalized communities, whether it's an immigrant population, maybe there's a language barrier, maybe they don't have resources in different languages for the legal process. So maybe that's something that we can do and we can help them with. Creating that safe space for communication of thoughts and fears and concerns, as well as their desires. What do they want to see happen? What is it? What are their fears? And then what do they want to see happen? And trying to let them explore that so that they can start to process it.
We have so Terry wrote a really good comment. She wrote, and the abused are often criminalized by police as also being an abuser because police don't know who is telling the truth and are tired responding to the calls, i.e., if we have to come back, you're both going to jail. And then Jessica said, when the abused defend themselves, they get in trouble too. I think she means physically defend themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and this is part of that larger conversation about that systems change. So training a community response to be better suited to respond to domestic violence situations. If you don't understand the dynamics of domestic violence, if you go into a situation where someone has scratch marks on their face, but the other person has strangulation marks that may or may not show up for 24 hours, as an officer, what you're trained to do is go with what's in front of you. You're not necessarily, there's some training, but not necessarily all your training tells you to look for different signs, to look for power and control dynamics, right? To ask the questions, the high lethality questions, right? And that's part of, hopefully, our job is to continue having this conversation with community partners so that there is that awareness, because we don't want things like that to happen, and unfortunately it does.
Marley, I have a question. Carol wrote this question, but I also, so she put the hardest part of getting them to leave is that they love that person. Right. Now, but isn't it like not real love? It's like, I hate to use this word because it makes it sound like it's the survivor's fault, but isn't there some kind of trauma bond that happens, like it's mistaken for love?
Sometimes, but not always. It could have been real love. We don't get into relationships with people thinking that at one point it's going to be abusive. We're not wired to make emotional decisions in that way, you know? So I personally, I don't think it's for me to say whether or not it's real or not real, because for that person, what they experience is very real.
Thank you, Marley.
And that person, whoever that partner is, might be, you know, you always start relationships, right, with your best foot forward.
Yeah.
And again, like we talked about, it's a learned behavior. So they might be an amazing person at some point, but they might need a lot of internal work and a lot of dealing with their own trauma or dealing with their own coping skills. So their best foot might have been really wonderful, but as it keeps going and they're not getting their needs met, and they fall back on behavioral tactics that for them it's survival, then that's when it becomes abusive, right? It's more than unhealthy, it's abusive at that point.
Yeah, and Terry commented that oftentimes the victims / survivors feel stuck, have no support and nowhere else to go. Plus the kids, etc. No love, just dependency. So, you know, it can be multiple different things. And Nicole kind of echoed what you said about, you know, you put your best foot forward in the beginning of the relationship, and then by the time you fall in love, and then they showed their true colors.
Right.
And then you think, oh, I like this. You're right, Nicole. And then you think that they will go back to the loving person that you knew.
Exactly. And that's when that at that point there's a lot of dependency that is built into that relationship, right? So it moves from being a relationship based on love and excitement and like, this is great, this is the best thing ever, into, okay, well, now we share bills, now we share a car, now we have children together, and it becomes a relationship based on dependency and that fear of what's going to happen without that person. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. This is amazing conversation. I really appreciate.
I know the feedback is amazing. I love it.
This is wonderful. So yeah, the empowerment model again goes to respecting those differences, avoiding assuming, and supporting the survivor's decision, whatever that will be. So as we know, it might take up to, as an average, not up to, but as an average, 7 times for someone to leave their relationship. And that could come from a number of different things. As like we just said, it could be something that they're dependent on. It could be a financial dependence, and maybe they aren't financially independent enough to leave. So they have to return back to that home and that shelter for that stability while they work on their next steps. And these are just some nuggets of quotes that I really like, that really kind of synthesize what the empowerment model means. It's the effort of creating a culture of power to reduce that power imbalance, and really believing people are their own best experts. I couldn't make a decision for anybody else outside of myself, and in order to help somebody, we have to work with them and what they're willing to do, what their desires are based on their fears. We have to work with them and believe that they are their own experts in order to really pull through on that empowerment model. So, and one of my all-time favorites is, the problem is the problem, the person is not the problem.
Love it.
So this is just a little bit. I'm going to try to, I don't know how much time we have, but I'm going to go through.
You have half an hour.
Okay, cool. So why do they abuse it? So this is shifting into a little bit of the psychology of the abusive partner, because I know that as peers and I know as service providers, there is that overlap where you work with the whole family and you work with, you know, potentially the abusive and the abuser and the survivor. So it's important to kind of understand both of those dynamics, and also how to support maybe the family as what help, that if they're open to it, what help they might need. So why do they abuse? Again, it's a learned behavior. They do it because it works. Like I said, it's a survival tactic. It's something they've learned. It's how they get their needs met. Societal reinforcement that, you know, especially if it's, you know, a man and a woman together and the man is the abuser, that societal reinforcement of, I'm the man, I wear the pants, you listen to me because I am the one in charge, right? Again, it's not caused by drugs or alcohol, it's not caused by anger. It is a learned behavior. At some point, there was a stimulus and an emotion attached to that, and then how they filter it and interpret it results in their behavior. And this could be a series of stimuli. This could be a series of events that happened to them, how they reacted to it, how they've seen it handled, and how they interpret it, and then they in turn express that behavior moving forward.
Marley, we got a question. If you could expand on this. Maria wrote, I don't really understand why it is not associated with anger. Can we go a little bit more into that?
Right. I mean, I'm not an expert in psychology. I'm not a therapist. I'm not, I don't have that kind of background, but from what I understand in the research that we have, that, you know, builds our trainings, is that it comes from a place not of anger but of survival, right? So at some point,
as someone who used to do therapy, and we got some good responses here too. It's, the person doesn't have to be angry to exert violence over the person.
right?
I've seen in my own personal experience, just everything was completely calm, and all of a sudden I get a backhand.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like he was angry. He wasn't yelling. It was just out of nowhere, and no real reason. And it was just to maintain control over me. And so I'd always be on guard and always be, you know, the psychology behind it. That's just my personal experience. You know, we got feeling inferior, fear, control plays more into it. We got other comments. Maria, I hope, you know,
I get it. Thank you.
And it can, you know, I mean, I get what you're saying. Like, anger can play a part of it. Yeah. At the same time, it is not the root cause, because a lot of times when you look at men and women that do abuse, they only abuse certain people, right? So let's say a woman is an abuser, okay, and she abuses her partner. Now, she can get angry at her kid and not abuse her kid, or she can be angry at her mom and not abuse her mom, or she can get angry at her boss and just not say anything and say, okay, sir.
I get it. So it's a secondary emotion. It's not the first emotion.
Right, exactly. It's something, and it doesn't always have to, like Sky was saying, it doesn't always have to play into that behavior piece. Like this graphic right here, there's the emotion part that comes, but then it goes through the filter, and then it's interpreted, and then the behavior comes out of it. So the behavior is the result of whatever emotions were happening, right? So it's fear. So I'm going to go to the next slide, which has some of the beliefs and behaviors. So say, for example, they feel like their power is slipping away from them, right? Like they're losing power and they're losing control over something in their life. That's not necessarily anger. That comes from fear, right? There's a lot of fear that goes into why someone would try to manipulate a situation. Right? It's a way to get their needs met, and when they feel like that's at risk, then they're gonna do what they've learned to do to get that back. Does that make sense?
And it's also it's fear and anxiety, right? It's like anxiety that they are losing control, that they're not going to be able to control everything. And Leanne wrote, they feel entitled to dominate.
Exactly.
Oh, Carol, thank you for sharing again. My stepfather would only beat my mother when fighting.
Mhm.
So yeah, all different kinds of ways that this can happen. And I think all the stories that we're hearing and everything you're sharing just shows us that. There's no set formula.
No. But the tactics tend to fall into that power and control wheel. The tactics tend to fall under intimidation, threats, emotional manipulation. But again, for every person, it's going to be very unique what abuse looks like for them. Right? In general, perpetrators is up here because this comes from a presentation we did with investigators. But their beliefs and behaviors come from that sense of entitlement. They feel justified in their actions. Maybe the household that they grew up in, there was always an excuse for why it happened, right? Well, it happened because mom didn't do this, or it happened because dad was acting, this way, and he knows that he can't act this way, right? Or there was always a reason that wasn't their own. There was never accountability that person grew up with, and so that learned behavior was that, well, it's not me, it's because this other person made me do it. There's also that win-lose mentality that I talked about a little bit before, that power, respect, love, and attention are finite resources and to be held onto and distributed accordingly, right? So that's where some of that fear comes in too, is that maybe it'll run out one day. Maybe that person will leave you if they're not dependent on you for these other things. Not all domestic violence or intimate partner violence is going to rise to that criminal level. It could stay, the majority of it could stay very much in the realm of emotional and mental, like psychological abuse. That is unfortunately sometimes the ones that don't come out, and it takes a long time for someone to reach out for help, is even when it doesn't reach that level of like that physical or that stalking or that false imprisonment, whatever the Florida statute says, it might not reach that level, but it might have been going on for a really long time in that emotional, non-tangible way. I mean, we've had participants that have come after being married and together with their partner for 15, 20 years. And they get to a point where it's just, it doesn't make sense anymore to them why they're living this life. Perception that manipulation and coercion are effective ways to get what you need met, the right to dominate, like you were saying, like someone was saying in the chat, and they'll do anything to maintain that dominance.
People feel ashamed. Jessica wrote, people feel ashamed.
Yes, exactly, and that's one of the barriers for leaving in general.
Yeah.
I did want to add a slide on how it impacts children, since people, we do work with families as a whole. It isn't, even though it is intimate partner violence, there are some primary and secondary ways that it can impact children. So I just wanted to touch on those briefly. So obviously being exposed to it is part of continuing that generational abuse, right? So hearing, seeing, and knowing about it adds to that potential for continuing it generationally. Abusers will also use children as a weapon against the other parent. This we have seen for sure, especially as children get older and have been manipulated by the abuser to think that the other parent is weaker or is deserving of abuse somehow. So it can happen it can look like the abusive parent threatening to take the children away. especially in relationships where maybe one parent comes from another country and is dependent on their spouse to get them residency or citizenship, threatening to, call ICE and have them deported and keep their children, or telling children to act a certain way when they get older towards the survivor, or even when they're younger, to be particularly mean because look at mom, she can't cook right. Look at mom, she can't do this right. And I use mom and dad interchangeably. Using children to monitor or question the survivor when they're separated. So if there is a separation and they are living in separate houses, when they do the time sharing, well, what is dad doing? Who's he seeing? Who's the new person that he's seeing? And by using them to kind of stalk on their partner, undermining the person's parenting effort, telling them not to listen, they disrupt rules, they disrupt the routine. Some people, we see this a lot also when they go to one parent's house and they get to do whatever they want and have however much screen time and get to do this and get to watch the scary movies and get new sneakers. But then when they go back to the parent who sees them during the week and who tells them that they have to go to bed at a certain time, they have to do homework at a certain time, using that dynamic against the other person to manipulate the children to act out towards the survivor parent. Accidentally causing harm to children as a result of violence towards non-offending parent. So they might get hurt in the process. If they're small and they're being held, they might be caught in the crossfires of an assault.
And not only that, you've seen, I'm sure we've all maybe we've seen where the child or children will try to physically defend the person that is being physically abused. I've had a kid that jumped on his dad's back to try to stop his dad from beating his mom.
And we had one teenage boy who was shot because he tried to get in the way.
Oh wow!
I mean, luckily it wasn't fatal, but he got caught in the crossfire trying to defend his family. Physical, sexual, emotional abuse and neglect perpetrated directly against the children. So this is, again, that primary impact on children. They're, just because it's intimate partner violence doesn't mean that they also aren't taking advantage of other vulnerable people or other members of their family. So this actually, abuse towards pets is something that maybe not everybody thinks of, but it could be a huge, huge red flag. Is if you're dating someone or starting to get to know someone and they're abnormally cruel to vulnerable populations like pets or maybe children, it's a huge, huge red flag. And that's something that we look for too when we ask the lethality of the situation that survivors are in, is if there has been any harm towards pets. It's been used before where they're members of the family and they're very vulnerable because they can't defend themselves and they don't know what's going on. And they might be
a good comment as well, Marley. The kids can start mimicking the behavior of the abuser and don't respect the abused parent.
Exactly.
Great participation, guys. Love it.
Definitely normalizing, right? So again, part of that generational, it's the normal way that we deal with miscommunication or we deal with fights in our family, is it always escalates into a lamp being thrown or a hole punched in the wall. Definitely has that negative impact and can harm children in their development. So again, that secondary effect could be disruption of routine, sleep, education, basic needs. So if the abuser says, you know what, you're not allowed to use the car anymore. Well, what happens if the survivor was the parent who went grocery shopping? Or the parent who took the children to school? Any sort of What if they stalk them at work and so they end up losing their job? I had a participant who lost 6 jobs in a row because the abuser kept showing up and kept harassing them at work and harassing their peers.
And that's against the law, actually. Employers are not supposed to be able to do that.
Right, but then there's other people in situations where they're maybe under the table, and so they can't really help it. They can't really enforce legal protections because of their own situation.
Exactly. Yes, true.
Well, some of the barriers to leaving, we've talked about this on and off, but that fear of retaliation, they don't have the financial resources, they fear losing children. Sometimes this comes up, especially in the world of recovery, right? If it's going to be used against you, right? Like, I don't know what's going to happen because they might throw this, this might be something that the judge uses against me. That's where hopefully, advocates step in and balance the scales for them. But the fear of not being believed that it's abuse, religious or family or societal pressures, that shame that's come up a few times. They don't have a support network. Maybe that isolation happened 6 years ago where they moved to Idaho and now they have no family and no friends and no job and no financial independence. They have no support network whatsoever to be able to leave. And then there's the cultural barriers. There's some cultures where getting a divorce just is absolutely not heard of. It's just not something that we do. I don't know if anybody else has any other types of barriers that maybe aren't listed
So
here.
Jessica wrote that in her situation, her ex used to take the air out of her tire so she couldn't go anywhere. So a very real obstacle to leaving.
Exactly, yeah. Your mobility, hindering your mobility. You might have people that you could go stay with, but no way to get to them.
And then I think now with and someone had mentioned earlier, with social media, it can be worse, and then also all these tracking, the abusers track survivors on phones now, right? You can find you can know where someone is at all times. It's ridiculous. Well, I don't like that.
No, and it's not, but I have actually heard of survivors flipping it on its head and actually using it to track the abuser to keep themselves safe.
Oh, okay.
So it could be, there's faults in it, but where there's a silver lining, hopefully we can find one. And that was definitely one.
That's good. I like that. Yes, Marley. Yeah. Okay, hold on. I got another one. Even after you leave, this is from Sabrine. I hope I said it right. Even after you leave, it can be dangerous. I had a loved one that was murdered. I'm so sorry. Murdered once her ex-husband got out of jail and he found her and killed her just like he promised he would. That gave me chills. Thank you for sharing such a personal story. Oh my gosh.
And it's not, that's why threats of violence, threats of homicide, threats of suicide should never, ever be taken lightly. They should never be brushed off because we don't know the capacity or what that person has committed in their mind to do. I'm sorry about that. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thank you, Sabrina. Thank you.
So some of the more tangible things that we can do, there is safety planning in the official way. We do a written safety plan with people, which again, it comes after our lethality assessment. We ask questions about threats of violence. We ask people about harm to other family members, harm to other people, harm to themselves. We ask about whether or not there was any abuse while they were pregnant, their financial dependent, their financial
situation. I'm sorry, I know I keep cutting you off. So Jessica said, when you're pregnant, it's worse.
Right. And people tend to think that, oh, well, when you're pregnant, they'll leave you alone because you're carrying your child. or you're at least pregnant, you should be protected. But that's almost worse because people, the mentality is like, well, now they really can't go anywhere, so they almost raise the stakes of what they try to get away with to gain control even more, which is kind of backwards, but that we've definitely seen that happen. So again, that's why safety planning is important, but assessing the situation and understanding the vulnerabilities that someone has is
Wait, we got another group. I'm so sorry, Marley. So Jessica said it's also because the focus is off of the abuser and now on the baby.
Exactly, that too, yep. Because they're not the center of attention anymore. They're not the one that the survivor is focused on. That's exactly right, yeah. So what a safety plan is not, it's not a checklist. It's not done once and then finished, and it's not made by the advocate or peer and then given to the survivor. It is created in collaboration with the survivor, and it's survivor driven. It's a plan that explores all the options, right? There's life generated risks, and then there's abuser generated risks. Again, understanding where those vulnerabilities are so you can shore those up and make sure that that person feel safe to move forward, because if they don't feel safe to move forward, if they're not prepared to move forward, then the chances of them returning to that situation are greater. So it's meant to be useful, and it's meant to be evaluated at any stage of the relationship, whether you're staying, whether you're trying to leave, whether you're trying to leave in secret, whatever it is, it's unique to everyone's situation. That's why it can't be a one and done, and it can't be something that we just give them to do. So these are some of the stuff that we go over when it comes to safety planning. We make sure that we cover where their finances are. Do they have their own bank account? Do they have their own savings account? Do they have, what does their credit look like? Are they able to open a line of credit for emergencies if in case they need to leave and need to pay for a hotel room, right? What is their technology situation? Do they have a shared computer at home? Do they have something that he's tracking or she's tracking through their phone or their email? I am definitely not an expert in this, and it scares me beyond all belief, the fact that there are free apps out there that you can track someone's location just by sending them a text message, and they don't even have to open it. Another thing that we plan with them, and we call it a hurricane bag. It's just, what is it that you need if you had to start over? What could you fit in a bag? What are all your important documents, your financial things, any sort of legal status, if it's your divorce paperwork, if it's your marriage paperwork, if it's your social security number, it's your children's stuff, it's your medical records. It's all the things that you would need to go if you had to leave in an instant and start over. We call it a hurricane bag because it's better than calling it an escape bag, especially if you're trying to explain it to your partner who finds it and asks what it is. So obviously another part of that conversation would be, where would you keep it in a safe place that they would probably not find it? One of my participants that I had when I worked at ChildNet as a DV advocate, she used to keep her purse in her children's closet because that was the safest. He never went in there. So her go bag was in her son's closet. Again,
and then another good tip is also, and I learned this from Women in Distress, keeping a track phone in the bathroom hidden, so that if he or she is coming after you, you can lock yourself in the bathroom and make a phone call to the police.
Yep. Yeah, and we have phones. So we actually had some phones donated from police departments, and so if that's something, if they're not phones with working networks or anything, but they're phones, you can get, a chip, you can get prepaid minutes, you can have it for you, and that's part of your go bag.
And I think you can dial 911 and still get through even if it's not hooked up. I'm not sure though.
That I don't know. I mean,
Yeah.
Someone else
I have to look into that. Oh yes, someone said yes, that you can.
So different routes of travel. So this is kind of how, like, where you could go long term, who can you stay with, but also ways to get out of your home in case there is an incident, that in case there's an argument that's escalating and you feel it's going to be, it's going to reach a violent level. So the best way to get out of your house, so we tell people, you know, stay out of your bathroom, stay out of the kitchen. If you can go outside, sometimes, and again, it's dependent on the survivor and what they know to be true. I knew people that would just go outside because they knew that that person didn't want to be seen yelling in public. So they would just go outside and that person would immediately stop yelling and the argument would cease, right? And so maybe time to cool down, whatever it is, but that was something that they would do to keep themselves safe. Safety planning around childcare. So if there's time sharing, safety planning around what that looks like. We had one participant who was court-ordered to do their exchange of the children at a police department that was a satellite office and didn't open until like 9 or 10, and she was mandated by the court to do the exchange at 8:30 on Saturdays. So there was no one there there was no point in doing it at the police department because no one was there. And so kind of being able to talk that through with them. Again, safety planning around employment. Maybe their employer needs to know that there is a restraining order. Maybe their employer, if they knew that, maybe they work under their table, or maybe they're nervous about the stability of their job. But talking with them about what it would look like to share that information with their employer to extend their support network when it comes to keeping themselves safe.
Marley, we are about out of time. How many more slides do you have?
That's it.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Okay, guys, so you know this is a 3-part series. So next Friday, we'll piggyback off this, and the Friday after that, we'll piggyback off that Friday. Now, thank you for putting this up, Marley. How do we connect our families to women in distress?
So what I can do is I'll send you, Sky, I'll send our community referral form. And if there is anyone that you have that you think may need it,
can you send it now, and then I can attach it to the chat box?
I can.
It's okay if you can't. Never mind.
No, I'm gonna try.
Because I can do an attachment into the chat box for everybody, so they can just have it right now. But if not, it's no big deal. I can just do it later when you send it. You got to put that on your website.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody is very thankful for this. Who do we email? Okay, I'll send my email.
Tobin, Susan sent it in an email to all staff, just so you know.
Oh, she did? Sonia has a question, Marley. I inquired about services for a peer and received a call about sending a referral form for DV classes. Haven't received it yet. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
So we need that referral.
That's me. I'll send it. I'm trying to figure it out.
Don't worry about it. So you send it to me, and I'll send it to the group. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. And thank you all so. Oh, I never introduced myself, did I? Okay.
I think you did.
My name is Sky Cleek. I work for Broward Behavioral Health Coalition, which is the managing entity of Broward County. I've been working in child welfare since 2006 on the provider side. I just recently, in the past 3 years, I did do it already? Okay, Sonia. Okay, bye guys.
So I did want to jump in and say that October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and our Education Prevention Department,
Purple ribbons.
is they're doing a series of trainings. So this is kind of the first, like, laying the groundwork of DV dynamics, safety planning, and things like that. But what will happen is during October, what they're doing is putting on a series. And so I'm doing a training in that series as well for accountability and high lethality indicators. But there's also going to be one on children, working with children in the virtual sense, with pandemic, everything. And then there's going to be a legal part too that our injunction for protection attorneys are going to be doing. So there's a lot to come, a lot more meat as far as trainings and tangible things to work with coming up in October that I'm going to send to you, Sky and Susan, so that maybe you guys can disseminate.
Of course.
So that's coming in October. So hopefully you guys get to jump on those too, because I can't do legal, and I'm not the best with kids. So the experts in those fields will be helping.
We can't be experts on everything. Thank you for your time, guys. I know everybody's time is valuable. This was an important topic that I just really feel like that I know that we need to get more on board with, and we need to have survivor peers. So thank you, everybody. See you next Friday, okay?
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye. I'm looking up the community referral forms, guy.